Hello and welcome back to the People of Construction and Development podcast. This week I'm talking to fellow town planner and colleague of mine, Laura Grimason of Gillings Planning. She tells me about her role as a planning consultant, the challenges she faces, the things she enjoys, and how she's had to work differently over the last year.
We've all adapted, haven't we? And it's more virtual meetings, which everyone's had to get used to.
She tells me about the issue of nitrates in the Solent, how it's impacted on development, and some of the solutions that are now coming forward.
As part of that, they can offer credits to developers for developers to buy in order to mitigate the nitrogen associated with their development.
We chat about the planning white paper and some of the things Laura would change about the current planning system.
Making local plans easier to understand and bring in more consistency to them.
And if you listen, you'll find out what this is about.
And if you ever travel to different galaxies, that'd be quite exciting. See how the planning systems work there. Warning, things might get broken. And I go back to the 80s.
So thank you for listening and enjoy the episode. I think we'll just kick off with Laura. What do you do as a planning consultant?
What do I do? So I always think it's really difficult to explain what we do because planning is so wide ranging. But I always say that I help developers to get planning permission for new developments. And I then, for things like care homes, houses, other commercial things, that sort of thing, just work them through the process and help to get planning permission for those things. And it's really interesting. I love what we do. It's really varied and we get to get involved in so many different things. I think it's just a really interesting role to be in.
What would you say is like the first sort of step for a development what would be the first stage you see it at?
We can see things from quite an early stage, from initial appraisal, which I think is probably the best way to do things, because then you get to look at things from the earliest stages and identify any kind of issues that you might need to address as you move forwards through pre-app process, which is where you go to discuss it with the council at an early stage and get their views on things, and again get an idea of what issues they might have with it and what you might need to address in a formal planning application later on. So we're quite lucky in that we do get to see things from a really early stage and get to influence how it might evolve from appraisal to a formal planning submission.
Yeah, I think the schemes that I can think back where I've had the most enjoyment from are the ones where you can actually go and visit when they've finally been built as well. So you can kind of see it from your very early appraisal stage all the way through to the final construction and someone using it and enjoying it. I think that's where pretty satisfying.
Definitely, yeah. And I haven't had the chance to do that yet, but I'm hoping that at some point over the next couple of years I'll be able to go and visit one that has been approved and built and see how it all works. That'll be really exciting.
What do you say is your biggest challenge day to day as a planning consultant?
I think it's always trying to resolve issues and get, local authority officers to see your point of view and try to negotiate to a position where they're happy, but where the client is also happy. That can be quite a challenge, but that's part of what I enjoy about the job. And I suppose it's all about just keeping good communication with those people and building a good relationship with them to try and get to the point where you can actually just have a conversation with them and go through the issues and see their point of view, but also help them to see your point of view and resolve things the best way that you can. Yeah.
So how did you actually get into planning, should we say? What did you do? Did you do a planning degree, or was it something you always wanted to do, or was it something you've sort of stumbled across during your life?
So I did a degree in geography and natural hazards at Coventry Uni, glorious Coventry, and as part of that I did a I think it was a 9-month work placement with a company in Manchester, and they were an architecture and planning consultancy. But my role was as a cartographic assistant. So I was helping draw maps and plans for the various planning and architecture projects that were going on. So I wasn't involved in the planning stage there, but I did get to see what planners did as a job and what their day-to-day life involved. And I thought it looked really interesting. So based on that, I think I then had a year left of my undergraduate degree, and I decided to go and apply for a master's in urban and regional planning at the University of Birmingham. And that was a year degree course, and it was really good, really interesting. We had lots of theory kind of learning, but also some of the more practical stuff, and we got to go on some really interesting site visits. So one of them was to the London Olympic Park when that was all being built. That was fascinating. And yeah, that was kind of how I got into planning, really. So I didn't stumble into it, but it wasn't really my ultimate aim when I went to uni. It was something that I found through the work placement that I did.
Yeah, I can't believe you got those cartography skills. I didn't realise that.
Yeah, they're good. I think they're still there. They're good ones to have, I guess.
Yeah.
I like maps. Maps look good, so yeah.
What did you do when you finished your degree? Did you go to a local authority first?
Yeah. I got a job again as a technical officer with Havant Council, and that was in the planning policy team. So that was mapping again for I think it was the emerging local plan. But because I had a geography planning degree, I was able to get involved in the planning process as well. So things like going to consultation events on proposed allocations and meeting people and talking about those, that kind of thing. So that was where I started, and then had a couple more local authority jobs, and then got into consultancy probably about 5 years ago, I think. Yeah.
And then you started at Gillings Planning. Can't remember now. It must have been 2 and a bit years ago, isn't it? Probably.
Yeah, I think it was 2 years ago in November. So yeah, 2 and a bit years. Yeah. Loving it.
Since.
No, exactly. I haven't. No. And things obviously changed a lot over this year, but it's great.
How have you had to work differently, would you say, over the last year compared to normal times?
Yeah. Well, it's been completely different, hasn't it? I think in normal times, I probably would work from home 1 day a week, but we're all working from home full time now. And I'm lucky in that it's just me in the flat in the day. So I've got my own little office, which can be quite really warm in the summer and really cold in the winter. So lots of layers in the winter.
Freezing today then?
Yeah, pretty freezing today. It's been we've all adapted, haven't we? And it's more, I suppose, more virtual meetings, which everyone's had to get used to, which is, it does take some getting used to, because I think you do lose a bit of the face-to-face kind of contact and talking in person. I think you get to pick up on body language and that kind of thing, and you can't always get that through virtual meetings. But in a different way, they're easier to arrange, and you can schedule them at short notice and have more meetings in a day than you might be able to if you were traveling further away to get to them. So yeah, it's fine, we can make it work, but I do miss being in an office, and I can't wait until we can get back to our lovely office, hopefully soon.
Yeah, I think the thing I've sort of missed is that bit of variety, isn't it, of being able to go different places, spending most of nearly a whole year in the same room.
Yeah.
not traveling to many sites and that kind of thing, which is kind of why what makes the job interesting, really, is seeing all those different places. You don't really get that at the moment. You only have Google Earth, Google Street View, and then loads of meetings on Zoom and Teams.
Yeah, and if you do get to go on a site visit at the moment, it's the most exciting thing ever, because it's just a chance to get out and see somewhere different, which is nice at the moment.
So if you were giving some tips or suggestions to someone who might have been in your position a few years ago when they're at university and they're not quite sure what they want to do, they might have an interest in planning or just discovered it like you and probably I did as well. What would you say is the best things that they could be looking to do to begin a career in planning?
I would say, I suppose, choose a relevant degree that will allow you to get into planning, and that could be something more general like a geography degree, or more specific equally as a specialist planning degree. But I think one thing that I think is really useful is if you can get any kind of work experience as when you're doing that, and that could be in the summer holidays. That's something that I did. As part of my master's degree, I went to do a 6-week placement with Birmingham City Council, and that was great because I got to see how it all worked in the workplace. So I think that's always a really, really good thing to do, just to get a bit of first-hand experience at the same time that you're learning.
Yeah, I'm seeing a common theme with everyone I speak to about work experience. And I think, I probably echo that, because that's where you really get to find out about the career you might be interested in, work out whether it's something you want to do. Now we're going to talk about nitrates in the Solent. And this is something that's been a big issue over the last 18 months, 2 years, I guess, for developers on the south coast. Personally, I've managed to sort of avoid having any projects that have been impacted by it. So I've only followed it broadly, but I know Laura has had projects which have been affected by it, and so I'd basically claim that she's our resident expert on nitrates in the Solent, and she's going to tell me a bit more about them today. So I think we'll start with right back at the beginning then, in terms of why are nitrates an issue in the Solent?
Yeah, fine. What a title to have, the resident expert on nitrates. So yeah, the Solent waters are protected, and they're subject to lots of different designations for their habitats and species that live within them. So they're very important in those terms. I think since it was about mid-2019, there's been an increased awareness of the issue of nitrates, or nutrients more generally, entering the Solent. And that relates to both nitrogen and phosphorus, but it seems like the emphasis for the Solent region is on nitrates more than phosphorus. And the issue with nitrates entering the Solent is that they encourage algae to grow on the water surface, which in turn prevents oxygen reaching the water and the sediment below. And obviously there's lots of different animals that live within that sediment that can no longer survive when that happens. And that means that the birds that live within the Solent region, they lose their food source. So that's become the real issue.
Where do the nitrates come from?
So for a long time, and I think one of the biggest producers of nitrates has been intensive agricultural uses, because of the fertilizers that they use on the land, and then eventually that drains into the catchments and enters the Solent. But it also, there's other sources, and I think the key one for the planning discussion is wastewater from new dwellings and other uses that include overnight stays. So that can be things like care homes, student accommodation, and also tourist accommodation, so hotels and Airbnbs, that kind of thing. Okay, so we know what the problem is: nitrates coming to Solent and impacting on the habitats, and those nitrates coming from farming and sort of residential uses. What's been the impact or the effect of that on the development industry on the south coast? Well, the main impact for us is that I think it was June 2019, Natural England issued the first guidance note on the matter, and they basically said that all new developments of dwellings and overnight accommodation should demonstrate that it's nutrient neutral. And that was based, I think it was a Dutch case where the outcome was that if a protected water environment was subject to I think it was an unfavourable status, then you had to look further into the impact of new development on that water body and prevent it worsening from its current position. So that, I think, was what triggered it all. But yeah, it's in the Solent area. The guidance has prevented planning applications being approved, which has had massive implications for developers. Obviously, they need to get things approved, and that hasn't been able to happen for about a year and a half now. Things have happened more recently, but we'll go into that when we look at the solutions to it. But equally, it has an impact on local authorities being able to demonstrate their 5-year housing land supply as well, because a lot of sites have been, I suppose, locked by the need to become nutrient neutral as of 2019.
Based on Natural England's guidance and advice, basically a number of councils said we can't determine planning applications unless you can demonstrate that neutrality, and that's kind of left thousands of homes sort of pending decision.
Yeah, I think I read something, and it was an estimate of something like 12,000 homes back in, I think it was mid last year, that were being stalled by this. So it is a massive impact. And yeah, different authorities have got different ways and different approaches of dealing with it.
So have you had any projects yourself that have been stalled or you've had to find solutions for?
Yeah, I've got a couple. So I've got one in Test Valley where it's for a single house, and it was submitted in May last year. It's still not approved because of the nitrate issue. So we're working with the council, and I think hopefully things will start to happen in Test Valley that mean we can get an approval for that. But with that one, we had specified a slightly different drainage system, which was a package treatment plant and a wetland linked with that. But again, discussions on that one are ongoing, and it has taken quite a long time, but I'm hopeful that we're getting towards a resolution now. It'd be good to get that one approved. And I've got another one which is in Fareham, and which we need to demonstrate nutrient neutrality on that one, and that's an ongoing thing as well.
Is that a house as well? Sorry,
that one's a care home.
Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously there's been a lot of talk about trying to resolve this and different solutions being put forward, etc. Again, I sort of only really know the sort of headlines. Can you tell me a bit more about what the solutions are?
Yeah, sure. So there's a number of different authorities who are using different solutions, and so I can run through a couple of those. I think the first one is one that is being delivered by the Hampshire and Isle of Wildlife Trust, and that is where they take an agricultural site out of agricultural use, and at the moment they've got a site on the Isle of Wight, and they then rewild it. So I think basically it will become like a nature reserve eventually, and then as part of that they can offer credits to developers to buy in order to mitigate the nitrogen associated with their development. And that's one that appears to be accepted in Fareham at the moment, but I think it can also deal with Portsmouth, Gosport and Havant if they need it to. And that's really interesting.
So how do the credits work? Is it like a calculation based on the size of the property or number of people living it, and does that give you a cost?
Yeah, so with any application you are required to do a nitrate calculation to see what the nitrogen output of your development is likely to be, and that looks at both existing uses and proposed uses. So for the existing uses, as an example, if you're on a agricultural site that's used intensively at the moment, then there's an argument that you're improving that, I think, because you're replacing that intensive agricultural use with dwellings or alternative overnight accommodation. But at the same time, you have to look at what the nitrogen output is going to be of your development, and that looks at wastewater from the development. So when they do a calculation, it depends on things like how many people are anticipated to live in the development. And once you've had a look at all of that, you can calculate the nitrogen output of the development. And it's when you then approach, if it was the Hampshire and Isle of Wight scheme, you can get credits per, so 1 credit is 1 kilogram of nitrogen. Purchase the number of credits that you need, and I think they're around £2,500 each at the moment for the Isle of Wight one.
So your scheme in Fareham, that's what you might be hoping to utilise, that credit purchasing system.
Yeah, hopefully, and really helpful for us is that Fareham have a mechanism that allows them to do that. So that's really positive, I think.
What other solutions are coming forward in the other authorities?
They're all similar. So I think the other ones that I'm aware of are so Winchester City Council and Havant Borough Council. They've got similar approaches in that they can apply Grampian style planning conditions, which kick in when a use is occupied, that require you to limit water usage per person on the development, and also require you to provide your mitigation solution before it's occupied, so that it's all in place, ready for it to be in use when people move in.
That maybe enables you to get a planning permission without having the final solution, which you can then go away and try and resolve and then put it into action, and then you can sell your property or move into your property, say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that gives a bit of flexibility, I think, for people who are trying to get planning permission for that kind of use. But at the same time, they've both also got a financial contribution scheme, again, where you can, if it's your chosen method of mitigation, you can pay a financial contribution, and that is secured through a Section 106 in a similar way that the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Trust scheme would be secured. And I think the standard charge in Winchester is around about £3,500 per kilogram, but it's lower in Havant, 1,200, around that kind of figure. So the figures vary, but I think it's linked with land costs and works that are required to address the nitrate output by the council. And there's one more, which is in Portsmouth. Again, it's a financial contribution which the council then use to enhance water efficiency in their own property, so their housing stock, that kind of thing. And that one is around 4,000 for a major scheme, so anything over 10 units. But it's reduced if it's a minor scheme, which I think is helpful, because you could have a single house and that would be a massive financial amount, wouldn't it, for a single house compared to a much larger scheme.
So your projects, and the one in Fareham, you're hoping to use that credit system, whereas the one in Test Valley, it's got its own individual solution. It's demonstrating that it is nitrate neutral or nutrient neutral.
Yeah, that's what we've proposed so far. But I think the council, they're working on a mitigation scheme themselves, so we're going to see what happens with that, and then it might be that we use that instead of or in combination with the solution that we put forward. I think we just need to see how that evolves and how that influences what we do for that one.
Yeah, it sounds like the situation isn't totally resolved yet. Do you have a sort of idea or thoughts on what the next steps might be in trying to resolve the issue fully?
Yeah, I think it's really good that some authorities have already started to prepare their own mitigation solutions, and things have come a long way since June 2019, when the issue became apparent. I think it's probably a case of other local authorities exploring their own solutions or working out how they can address things. There's also, I think the government are also preparing a nitrate trading platform, so a credit trading platform. But that I think is expected to come in the next 2 years. So that might be something that hopefully we'll see progressing over the next couple of years. But I think in the meantime, local authorities will probably start to, explore their own solutions or try and find ways that they can unlock the housing that is currently on hold, I guess, from the issue.
Yeah. So I guess the important thing for people looking at or advising on sites in the, particularly on the south coast and those Hampshire authorities, is to bear in mind the nitrate issue still ongoing.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'd say whatever authority you're in, check from the earliest possible stage what the situation is there and whether there's a mitigation solution in place, and that can be as part of a pre-app. I think I'd suggest that you establish that very early on, because then you know what you might be required to do later on, and it might inform the design of the scheme depending on what the solution is.
Yeah, I think through some of my wider sort of general reading, there are potentially lots of other places around the country which could have the same problem. There's lots of nitrate sensitive areas, and it could happen elsewhere, which I guess is why the government could be quite interested in bringing forward that sort of national level solution to it, I guess.
Yeah, I think it was Herefordshire that was one that I've heard of more recently that was facing similar issues. So I suspect that it probably will happen in other places as well. But I suppose they'll be able to learn from what has been done in the Solent area, hopefully, if things continue to go the way they are and mitigation schemes become more widespread in the area.
There's obviously loads more you could talk about on nitrates, and I guess if anyone's interested in hearing more, they could give you a call and you could tell them all about it.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
So I think just looking ahead at the planning system, we've over the last, I guess, a year, 6 months, we've seen lots of talk and consultations on changes to the planning system. And I think you're going to touch briefly on some of those with a particular sort of interest or thoughts on sort of new ways of consulting or engaging people in planning.
Yeah, so last year the government consulted on quite large-scale changes to the planning system. I think it was in August, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens with those this year, to see whether they do bring any, if they progress those, and how that might affect people, local authorities preparing local plans, for example. So that'll be interesting, and also how they go on with addressing the delivery of housing and that kind of thing after the build thing last year that the government tried to encourage as their new motto, I think. But yeah, I think that'll be really interesting to see, and equally it'll be interesting to see how, having adapted to having to work from home and have virtual meetings, how that carries on into the rest of 2021, and whether when we're able to go back into the office and actually meet people, whether people will still want to do that or whether they'll keep on with the virtual meetings and consultations. I think people probably will have got quite used to that over the past year, and so it might be that we get to the stage where you still go and meet people, but you don't go and meet people as often as you would have done, and instead you have a quick Zoom or Teams meeting.
Yeah, I think obviously I think in the white paper talks about trying to improve and sort of broaden out engagement in terms of plan making and the sort of decision taking, that kind of thing. I think it's been quite interesting this year in terms of public consultation, having to use websites, Zoom, and that kind of thing, and surveys up rather than actually going and standing in a village hall for an afternoon one day. I've sort of seen my project certainly getting more responses, and probably from a broader range of people of different ages, which I found quite interesting. I don't know if you've seen similar on your projects as well.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good way of getting more people involved, because a lot of people might prefer to just have a look at a website in the comfort of their own home and then contribute to an online survey. That they might prefer that to going into an actual consultation event. So I think it's interesting, and it probably is a way of getting more people involved in the consultation process. And I know that for many years we've been trying to broaden out the number of people who do get involved and the age range of people that do get involved. So hopefully that will continue, and it might be that when you can hold physical consultation events, you can also combine that with a bit more social media, or a website or something, to try and get different people involved as well.
Yeah, I can see that being that sort of dual tactic of, you know, a physical consultation and a virtual one, sort of being able to reach more people and sort of be able to hear the thoughts of more people, being really beneficial.
Yeah.
In terms of the white paper and the sort of changes proposed, what were the sort of couple of things that sort of stood out to you, I guess?
Well, the main one was moving towards a completely different system where you'd have your 3 different areas. I think it was growth, renewal, and protection. Is that right? And it was moving more towards a zoning sort of system where you'd have different allowances in growth areas. So where new large scale schemes would be encouraged in growth areas, renewal was more about looking at reusing brownfield land and making the most effective use of that. And then your protected areas were continuing the protections that you have in areas like Greenbelt, AONB, that sort of thing. So it does a lot of what the current planning system does, but it's a different way of structuring policy. I think with the policy side of things, the move was looking at becoming more of a map-based system, and I think that's a good thing, because it's often easier to understand things if you can click on a map, go to the area that you live in, and see what area you're in, if you're in a growth, renewal, or protected area, and understand from that what you might be allowed to do in that area. Equally, if you're looking at a site for a client, if you can see it's in a growth area, you know it's definitely one that they would consider development in. But if it's in a protected, then it might be more of a challenge. Not impossible, because I think there's still room for an element of discretion where you can make a case for development in those protected areas, similar to how we do with Greenbelt at the moment, where we can look at whether it's an appropriate development or not, and if very special circumstances apply, that kind of thing. But it is, I think they are looking towards moving to a completely different system. So really interested to see how that evolves this year.
I think for me, that's the sort of mapping thing you touched on is quite interesting, because obviously now we have a whole raft of different proposals maps. Some of them are interactive, some of them are quite good, some of them are just PDF documents, and some you can't even find because websites are so difficult to navigate. So I think the idea in there of having sort of a whole map for England where everything's sort of accessible from one point, that would probably be really handy. I think the thing that sort of struck me was the sort of engaging with plan making probably becoming even more important in terms of promoting sites, because it sort of seems looking to shorten the process significantly. So the opportunities to make representations and to promote something look to be getting smaller. So you're probably going to be doing more intensive detailed work in one go, rather than drip feeding more information and maybe building upon it as you sort of get more confidence that your site might be allocated. So if you had the choice of changing one thing now, what would it be?
It probably would be the map, making local plans easier to understand and bring in more consistency to them through that map-based process, so you can easily see what is in place in an area, and then I guess linking to the relevant policies as well. And if they have a standard structure for local plans, I think it's easier for all kinds of different people to have a look at what they're meant to do and what local plans are trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I mean, some days that we struggle to find the information. So someone that is, has a very limited understanding of planning, or just happens to stumble across a development and wants to find out more, then I can imagine it being very difficult. So some sort of simplicity to that would probably be great.
Yeah, definitely.
I think we're going to do a mini Q&A session to find out a bit more about you. I've got several questions. Some of them are more serious. Well, not too serious. Some are just fun. So we'll just work our way through and see how you respond. So question 1, tea or coffee?
Coffee.
And if after work, beer or wine?
Beer.
Oh, I thought you'd say that. You do like a good microbrewery, don't you?
I like a good craft beer, yeah.
If you could be any Marvel character, what would you be? Or who would you be?
Who would I be? I would be, I don't know. Captain Marvel. I like her. Well, I like Black Panther. He's so cool.
Why?
That's... Oh, it'd be nice to have a superpower, wouldn't it? And to be able to travel to different galaxies. That'd be quite exciting. See how the planning systems work there.
Have you got a favourite sport?
Yeah, I probably would say cricket. I think I like cricket. I used to play actually. I played in a women's team when I was doing my masters, and then I tried to find one when I moved to Portsmouth, but I couldn't find one, so I just stopped playing, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, I still like watching it. Well, going to watch it when we can, so that'll be good to go and see a match.
If you had a warning label, what would it say?
Oh, that's a tough question. I'm quite clumsy, I think, so I think I'd have to have something about, I don't know, warning, things might get broken. I don't know.
A flake or a twirl?
A twirl.
Yeah, it contains the crumbs, doesn't it? A bit better.
Yeah, really does.
Top TV or Netflix series recommendation?
Oh, The American Office is hilarious, and I think it's better than the English one. So yeah, I would definitely recommend that.
We'll have to add it to the list.
Yeah, do. There's I think there's 9 series, so it'll keep you busy over the next month of lockdown.
What would you say your proudest planning moment is?
A scheme recently which has got resolution to grant planning permission, but it's a really exciting local centre scheme, and it was great to work on, and I'm just really pleased that we got to the stage that we did after the planning committee. So that's probably the proudest one, I think.
Have you learned anything about yourself over the last year?
Yeah, I think I've learned that I am able to adapt and to slow down, because I think I had a tendency when we could go out and do lots and lots of stuff to fill all of my time doing all kinds of things, seeing nice things, seeing friends and doing exercise classes and walking, and just packing every part of my weekend to do as much as I possibly could. But I think sometimes it's nice to maybe turn it down a bit and take a bit of time just to relax and still see people, but have more quality time with them, and not trying to see as many people on one day. Kind of making better use of the time, I think.
If you could only have one meal for the rest of your life, what would you have?
I don't know. These are really tough questions. I would have... There's a really nice hot dog place around the corner, like 2 minutes from where I live, and I think I would choose one of their amazing meals, probably a veggie one, because they're really tasty. So yeah, and a craft beer, if that's allowed to have a drink with it as well.
All right, vegetarian hot dogs and craft beer forever. It is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you could have the DeLorean for a day from Back to the Future, would you go forward or backwards in time, and how far would you go?
I go backwards and I go back to the 80s because I was born in the 80s, but I think I'd have, if I was older during the 80s, I think I'd have appreciated the music and the lifestyle. So I think that's where I'd go.
And that was me thinking you go forward in time to see how the planning white paper turns out.
Yeah, that's my second answer.
What do you do to keep balanced in life?
I try to I find exercise really helps to clear the mind if I need to. So I try to do that as a bit of a way to unwind, especially working from home. It gives you a bit of separation from finishing work and then having an evening away from work. So I like that. And in normal times, I'd go and do, again, all kinds of exercise classes in the gym, and it's really fun and I really like that. So I find that works for me.
And then what do you think is the biggest issue we'll face in 50 years' time? Just to keep it light, you know.
Yeah. It's probably, well, it's got to be something to do with climate change, I think, and seeing how that affects us. Probably it'll be before 50 years' time, but it's quite a massive issue, isn't it? And it's quite a scary issue. And hopefully we find ways of dealing with things in the next 10 years to try and limit the impact for future generations and in 50 years' time.
Yeah. And then making it a bit more like, what was your favourite holiday? Your favouriteest holiday you've ever been on?
I really liked, I didn't expect to, but I really liked Vegas. I didn't think I'd like it because it's gambling, which I don't really gamble a great deal. And it just felt like a place that isn't really what I'm about, but it was brilliant and it was such an adventure. And we'd gone to LA and San Francisco beforehand. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed that. That was about 3 years ago, I think. And I'd love to go back one day.
Yeah, it does sound quite fun. I've not been there myself. And then finally, if all the lockdown restrictions were removed tomorrow, what would be the first thing you'd do?
I go back to Birmingham, see my family, because I haven't been back since August, and it's too long.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that would be the first thing.
I think there'll be a lot of people wanting to do that as well. I think mine might, similar, but maybe get a haircut. It'll probably be quite high up the list.
Yeah.
It gets slowly longer every day. Thank you very much, Laura. That was really interesting, and I think I've learned quite a bit more about you. You like playing cricket, going to Vegas, and well, I knew you like beer already, but not that you wanted it every day. Learn a bit more about the nitrate issues in the Solent and some of the solutions. As I say, I've not had any projects there myself, but if I do get a project in that area, I'll be coming to you first to find out what I need to be looking to do. And it was interesting to hear some of your thoughts on the white paper, particularly around making things more accessible through improving sort of policy proposals, maps, and that kind of thing. So I'd just like to say, thank you for taking part today.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to speak to you.
Yeah, it's good to speak to you, and hopefully I'll see you in person in a few weeks' time, maybe.
Yeah, and we sit opposite each other, don't we? So it'll just be like this, but with a plastic screen in the middle.
Yeah. Well, have a great day.
Thanks, Tom. You too.
Cheers.